At midnight, she smiled while poisoning me, manipulating my family, and hiding the truth. How did I survive? It was around midnight when I sat in my car outside the church parking lot, my hands shaking so hard I spilled half the gas station coffee in my lap. My brother Gregory sat beside me, silent, his jaw tight. The smell of baby powder clung to my hoodie because I had held my niece before I left the house, but now it just felt suffocating, like a reminder of everything I'd lost. Inside, the entire congregation was waiting for me. Not to comfort me. Not to pray for me. No, they were there for the intervention meeting, staged by my own daughter-in-law, Katherine. I never thought I'd be the kind of man whose life got hijacked by a 23-year-old manipulator. But there I was, 33 years old, with a $3,200 monthly salary that barely kept me afloat, my reputation in shreds, and migraines so bad I sometimes vomited in the bathroom stall at work. Katherine had gotten inside my head so deeply that I couldn't tell where my fears ended and her lies began. Here's how it all started. Katherine came into my life when she married my son, Daniel, 2 years ago. At first, she was polite, almost too polite, like she was studying us. I thought she was just shy. Daniel loved her, and that was enough for me. I even put our first family photo with her up on the mantel, smiling beside Daniel like she had always been meant to belong. But small things started to creep in. She would ask strange questions. Mark, do you ever wonder why your parents never talked much about your early years? Or she'd casually mention adoption laws, inheritance rights, even throw in remarks about how not everyone knows where they really come from. At first, I brushed it off. But Katherine had this way of making every offhand comment sound like she knew something I didn't. The first real red flag came after I got promoted at work. It was supposed to be a happy time. I was finally making enough to maybe save for a better apartment. But Katherine cornered me at the family dinner table one night. You know, she said sweetly, twirling pasta on her fork, money doesn't mean much if it's not really yours. I frowned. What are you talking about? She just smiled, wide and knowing. Ask your parents, or maybe your brother knows. I looked across the table at Gregory. He looked down at his plate, and for the first time I felt that sinking dread in my gut that maybe she wasn't just stirring drama. Maybe she was onto something. The manipulation didn't stop at the table. She texted me at odd hours, always around midnight, like she knew that's when I couldn't sleep. Messages like, don't you think it's weird they kept baby powder in your room until you were almost 4? Secrets always come out, Mark. I'd sit there in the glow of my cracked phone screen, heart racing, migraines pounding, wondering if I was losing my mind. Gregory tried to reassure me. She's messing with you, man. Don't let her get in your head. But even he started acting strange. Sometimes I caught him avoiding my calls, like he knew more than he was willing to admit. The worst part, Katherine was good at making me look unstable. She'd tell Daniel I was paranoid, whisper to neighbours that I had episodes. And I'd admit that. The stress triggered something in me. I'd lose track of time. Once, I found myself standing in the kitchen holding a half-eaten bag of gas station chips, no memory of driving there or buying them. Dissociation, my therapist would later call it. By the time the intervention was arranged at church, Katherine had the entire community convinced I was dangerous, unstable, and hiding a dark secret. My own congregation, people I'd known since I was a kid, turned their backs when I walked in. I heard the whispers. That's the one who lied about being adopted. I didn't even know if it was true. That night in the church basement, Katherine sat at the head of the table, smiling like a queen. She slid a folder across the table toward me. Go on, Mark, she said, her voice syrupy. Open it. Everyone deserves to know the truth. I reached out, my hands trembling, sweat dripping down my temple. The smell of baby powder hit me again, strong and disorienting, like it was leaking from the walls. I thought I was going to pass out. Inside the folder was a single sheet of paper, my adoption certificate. My world cracked open. I can still hear the sound of the paper sliding across the church table. It was thin, but it hit like a grenade. My hand shook as I picked it up, and the room seemed to tilt sideways. The word adoption was bold at the top, stamped and official. The date, August 15, 1990, a date I'd never once associated with my life. My own mother sat in the corner, head bowed, silent. Katherine leaned back in her chair with a smirk. See, I wasn't lying. He's been hiding this from all of you. I wanted to scream. I didn't even know. My voice cracked, raw and desperate. But the eyes around the table were already judging, already condemning. After that night, suspicion became my shadow. Every sound, every glance, every comment from Katherine felt like proof of something bigger. She wasn't just stirring chaos, she was orchestrating a psychological war. One night, around midnight again, I was lying in bed when my phone buzzed. A text from her. Truth burns, doesn't it? Don't worry, more people will know soon. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. My migraines had returned, sharper than ever. Sometimes I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced I'd heard someone whispering in my room. I started keeping a bag of gas station snacks, chips, jerky, candy in the glove compartment of my car. I didn't even like half of it, but eating junk on lonely midnight drives was the only thing that made the nausea and anxiety ease for a while. Gregory, my younger brother, tried to support me, but even he wasn't steady anymore. We'd sit in my apartment, the glow of the family photo on the mantel staring down at us. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked him one night, my voice breaking. Gregory rubbed his face. He was only 20, still in college, but he looked aged by the tension. I didn't know until Katherine dug it up. She found the papers before I did. That sent a shiver through me. Why does she have them? How the hell did she even? She said she was organizing Daniel's files. He interrupted. His tone was guilty, like he already knew how wrong it sounded. I remember slamming my fist on the coffee table so hard my knuckles bruised. Katherine had no right. But the sick part was she was winning. It wasn't just family anymore. At work, whispers followed me. My supervisor, normally warm, avoided eye contact. A coworker named Renee, one of those people who always seemed to know things, pulled me aside. "Look," she whispered, glancing around the break room. "I don't know what's going on in your personal life, but I overheard someone talking about your medical stuff. Your doctor. He shouldn't be sharing anything, but Katherine, she mentioned details no one else should know." I froze. "What kind of details?" Renee lowered her voice. "Migraines, panic attacks, stuff you told him in confidence." She quoted things you said in your appointments. I didn't want to believe it, but Mark, you need to watch you back. The room spun. My own doctor, someone I trusted with my mental health, was feeding her ammunition. That was when paranoia bled into every corner of my life. After I got promoted, the pressure only intensified. My new role meant more responsibility, more eyes on me. And Katherine used that. She whispered to Daniel that I was unstable, told neighbours I was paranoid, and the whisper spread. Even the cashier at the gas station gave me a strange look when I bought coffee and chips at midnight, like she'd already heard some rumour. The stress was destroying me. I started having dissociative episodes more frequently. I'd lose blocks of time. Once, I woke up at the kitchen counter, staring at a plate of food I didn't remember making. Another time, I came to while driving, halfway across town, headlights glaring into me. The scariest part wasn't losing time. It was wondering if Katherine was right, if I really was unstable. The breaking point came one night when Daniel called me. His voice was cold, almost rehearsed. "Katherine says you've been threatening her." "What, Daniel? No. She says you told her you'd ruin her life if she exposed you." My chest went tight, panic clawing at my throat. "She's lying. She's manipulating you. Please, you know me. I would never." But the silence on the other end told me everything. Katherine had her hooks in him too. I hung up and sank onto the couch, staring at the family photo on the mantel. Our smiles felt like strangers. The walls closed in. The smell of baby powder lingered from when my niece had visited earlier that week. For some reason, it made me nauseous. And in that moment, I realised Katherine wasn't just trying to expose a secret. She was trying to rewrite my entire identity, and she was succeeding. It took me weeks to process what I'd learned, but the truth hit me like a truck the night I ended up in the hospital. I woke up in a sterile room, the taste of metal in my mouth and the smell of antiseptic sharp in my nostrils, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The doctors told me I'd been poisoned, nothing fatal, but enough to send me into acute organ stress. Katherine had been tampering with my food for months, carefully dosing my snacks and meals, making me think I was losing my mind. I stared at the ceiling, the family photo on the mantel flashing in my mind. That photo, once a symbol of pride, now felt like a cruel joke. She had smiled beside us while systematically destroying everything I cared about. After that hospital stay, therapy became a lifeline. My therapist, Dr. Simmons, was patient but firm. "Mark, what you're experiencing, nightmares, panic attacks, dissociation, is trauma-induced. You were being targeted systematically. Your brain is rewiring itself to survive." I nodded, tears sliding down my cheeks. I felt like I was drowning in a pool of betrayal, and I wasn't sure I'd ever surface. The secondary betrayals kept stacking. One day, I confronted my doctor, Dr. Hanley, about Renee's warning. He hesitated, eyes flicking nervously. I didn't think it would matter," he said quietly. "Katherine asked about your migraines, your appointments. I thought she was just curious. I didn't realise she'd used it against you." I wanted to scream. My private medical information, the very thing I trusted him with to heal, had been weaponized. Gregory became a reluctant ally. At first, I thought he was complicit. But one night, he showed up at my apartment holding a crumpled envelope. "Mark, I found this," he said, voice trembling. It was a folder full of texts, emails, even receipts showing Katherine's methodical manipulation not just of me, but of Daniel, neighbours, and even members of the congregation. "She's been planning this for months," Gregory said. "She wanted everyone to turn against you." I could barely breathe. The community, the workplace, the church, all had been fooled. I had trust issues on every level, and now the evidence proved just how deep it went. The social fallout was devastating. The church congregation whispered behind my back, their pity thinly veiled over suspicion. "Poor Mark, he's been hiding things all along," I heard a parishioner mutter in the pews. At work, colleagues avoided me, the gossip swirling faster than I could address it. Even strangers on the street seemed to give me the side eye as if I carried a dark secret. I became hyper-aware of every interaction, unable to trust anyone. Panic attacks would strike without warning. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, sometimes screaming in the middle of the night. Dissociative episodes left me wandering the city streets, forgetting where I parked my car, unsure if I'd even driven there. And then came the most surreal betrayal. Katherine had corrupted my own family doctor into feeding her information. My brother, nearly frozen by fear and shame, and even Daniel, my son, had been manipulated into questioning my sanity. Every alliance I thought I had was either broken or a facade. I started keeping meticulous records, timestamps, receipts, conversations, anything that might prove to the world that I hadn't lost my mind. I wrote down the taste of gas station snacks I forced myself to eat to stay awake, the smell of baby powder that seemed to trail me everywhere, even the exact dates Katherine had sent those midnight texts. Then one night, as I sat staring at the glowing family photo on a mantel, Gregory handed me his phone. A series of screenshots showed Katherine messaging a mysterious account, coordinating with someone about how to isolate me socially and financially. My pulse spiked. "She's not working alone," Gregory whispered. "Someone's been helping her from the inside." It all clicked. My suspicions about the doctor, the co-workers, the church, it wasn't paranoia. It was orchestrated. Katherine had weaponized everyone around me. The nightmares, the panic attacks, the sense that the world had turned against me, they were all symptoms of trauma, but also of meticulous, calculated manipulation. I realised then that if I wanted to survive this, I couldn't just fight Katherine. I had to fight the whole system she had twisted to her advantage. and deep down, I knew I had to expose her in a way that would make even the people who had doubted me take notice. I felt broken, yes. But amid the chaos, a spark lit inside me. I was no longer going to be her puppet. I would take control of the narrative, document every betrayal, and prepare for the moment when the truth could no longer be ignored. Because at the core of all this devastation was one fact Katherine could never touch. My mind, though battered, had not been destroyed. Not yet. The day of the court hearing arrived on March 14, 2024, and I hadn't slept properly in over a week. My migraines were relentless, and I kept tasting the faint metallic hint of the poison Katherine had fed me months ago. The courthouse smelled sterile, with just a trace of coffee from the lobby vending machine. I clutched a folder stuffed with every piece of evidence Gregory and I had collected, emails, receipts, text messages, even a vial of the chemical my doctor confirmed Katherine had slipped into my food. When Katherine walked in, her smile was as calm and confident as ever. Daniel sat beside her, still looking torn, but obedient to her narrative. The judge called the session to order, and the room fell into a tense silence. Mr. Mark Thompson, the bailiff intoned, "Please present your case." I stood, my hands trembling, but my voice was steady, sharper than I felt. Your Honour, this case isn't just about alleged manipulation or lies, it's about months of psychological and physical harm inflicted upon me by Katherine Elizabeth Lawson. I opened the folder and began laying out the timeline, from midnight texts to poisoned snacks, showing receipts of gas station purchases I'd been forced to make, and time-stamped screenshots of her messages. The courtroom murmured. Katherine's smirk faltered slightly, but she quickly masked it. Objection, her attorney shouted. These are anecdotal claims. He has no proof of deliberate poisoning. I took a deep breath. Actually, I do. I handed a vial to the bailiff. This sample was collected by my doctor and independently tested. It contains traces of a neurotoxin consistent with what I ingested in my food over the last 6 months. Eyes widened. The judge leaned forward. Even Daniel looked shocked. Katherine's smile wavered, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. Furthermore, I continued, my voice rising with a mix of anger and relief, I have evidence showing my doctor, Dr. Hanley, was coerced into sharing my private medical records with Katherine. Emails, texts, and witness statements from colleagues prove that she orchestrated a campaign to isolate me socially and psychologically, turning even my family against me. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The murmurs grew louder. My stomach twisted, but the adrenaline kept me steady. This was the moment I had been preparing for, the moment I reclaimed control over my life. Katherine tried to interject. Mark, relying none of this is true. I cut her off. You smiled while destroying my family. You manipulated Daniel, Gregory, and even my community. You systematically poisoned me. You knew exactly what you were doing. And for what? Control? Power? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Daniel's eyes welled up, realizing for the first time that he had been deceived. The climax came when the police officer assigned to the case stood. Your Honour, we have been monitoring Katherine Lawson for several months following a tip from an anonymous source. She has been involved in multiple instances of fraudulent behaviour and intentional harm. Our surveillance corroborates Mr. Thompson's evidence. The courtroom erupted. Katherine gasped, her composure cracking. She had no backup plan, no lies left to tell. The whispers that had followed me for months now turned toward her shame, disbelief, astonishment. I felt a wave of vindication, but it was complicated. I was still trembling, my body shaking from months of poisoning and stress-induced panic attacks. My mind had been rewired by trauma. Yes, but this was a turning point. I had shown the world the truth. The judge, stern and unwavering, finally spoke. Miss Lawson, your actions constitute criminal and civil violations. You are ordered to cease all contact with the Thompson family immediately. Further legal proceedings will determine the extent of compensation and potential incarceration. I slumped back into my chair, exhausted, and my eyes met Gregory's. He whispered, You did it. You finally proved them wrong. But even amid the victory, the psychological scars remained. The nightmares, dissociation, panic attacks, they didn't disappear instantly. And yet, in that courtroom, I realized something profound. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. I had confronted the orchestrator of my trauma and survived. Walking out of the courthouse, the late afternoon sun on my face, I felt the first hint of relief I'd experienced in months. I still smelled traces of baby powder clinging to my clothes, but now it reminded me of survival, not suffocation. I looked at the family photo on my mantle in my mind and vowed to rebuild the life Katherine had tried to destroy. I had exposed the lies, faced the betrayals, and even though the road to recovery would be long, the moment I stepped outside that courthouse felt like the first breath of freedom I had taken in years. The weeks after the court hearing were a blur of exhaustion and confusion. On March 21, 2024, I woke up on the couch at 2:13 a.m., drenched in sweat, my heart hammering as though it wanted to escape my chest. The nightmares hadn't ended. I still saw Katherine's smile over and over, the one that had slowly dismantled everything I held dear. I had panic attacks that left me unable to breathe, sometimes for hours, until Gregory would arrive, my lifeline in those moments. Even with legal victories, the social consequences were brutal. The church congregation, once my extended family, had mostly abandoned us. Some whispered, some avoided eye contact, others openly mocked my mental instability in hushed tones. At the gas station where I bought snacks at midnight to calm my nerves, the cashier, who had always been friendly, now glanced nervously at me, as if waiting for the next scandal to erupt. At work, things were worse. The promotion I had fought so hard for suddenly felt like a curse. Colleagues whispered in corners, sidestepped me in hallways, and emails went unanswered. Renee, the coworker who had warned me about Katherine, now seemed distant, maybe out of fear, maybe out of exhaustion from watching the fallout. I felt completely isolated, trapped in a life where everyone I had trusted was either complicit, deceived, or both. Trauma didn't just manifest socially, it ate away at me physically. Dissociative episodes became frighteningly common. One night, I found myself staring at the family photo on the mantel, suddenly convinced I had never been part of that smiling group at all. Time itself became disjointed. I'd lose hours without knowing what I had done. Flashbacks of Katherine slipping something into my snacks, the smell of baby powder in the rooms I once felt safe in, and the bitter metallic taste from the poisoning haunted every moment. I tried to seek help, returning to therapy 3 times a week. Dr. Simmons had me do intensive cognitive processing therapy, journaling every intrusive thought, every moment I felt unsafe. "Mark, none of this is your fault," he repeated, but the words felt thin against the weight of public humiliation, familial betrayal, and self-doubt. I'd lie in the therapy office, staring at the ceiling, gripping a pen until my knuckles turned white, and wonder if I'd ever trust anyone again. Even mundane things like buying groceries, paying bills, or picking up snacks at midnight became exercises in hypervigilance. I'd triple-checked every purchase, every interaction. Money that should have been mundane, like my $3,200 monthly salary, suddenly felt inadequate, like it couldn't possibly protect me from the chaos Katherine had unleashed. Social media wasn't a refuge either. Rumours spread faster than I could control. Friends I thought I could lean on disappeared or deleted me quietly, embarrassed by the drama. Daniel was a mixture of guilt and confusion, still influenced by the residue of Katherine's manipulation. Gregory tried his best to hold the family together, but he was barely 20, juggling college, his own trauma, and my breakdowns. I started tracking symptoms obsessively, how many panic attacks per week, how long dissociative episodes lasted, the intensity of nightmares. I even recorded conversations and texts to avoid further surprises. I felt like a soldier on constant alert, surviving day to day, minute by minute. Then came the incident that nearly broke me completely. I received a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a baby powder-scented envelope with a single photo. Katherine smiling in our living room, our ** family photo in the background, ** holding a bag of my old gas station snacks. I nearly collapsed, hyperventilating, convinced she had returned to finish what she started. I called the police, who reassured me it was being investigated, but the fear lingered. Even simple pleasures, like food or sleep, had become triggers. Midnight snacks felt dangerous. Any smell of baby powder was nauseating. The city streets at night felt like a threat, and strangers' glances felt accusatory. I realized I was at rock bottom, emotionally shattered, socially isolated, and physically weakened. But as I lay in the hospital bed during a follow-up check, I noticed a pattern in my therapy notes. Despite everything, I was surviving. Each panic attack, each dissociative episode, each sleepless night had not destroyed me entirely. I had endured the worst of manipulation, betrayal, and poisoning, and I was still here. That realization became the foundation for recovery. I would have to rebuild my life carefully, one step at a time, trusting only verified allies, relying on therapy, and gradually reclaiming the social and professional spaces Katherine had poisoned. The road ahead was long, and the scars would remain. But even at rock bottom, I knew one thing: the fight wasn't over. And I was starting to understand that my trauma didn't define me, my resilience did. Recovery didn't happen overnight. The first weeks after hitting rock bottom were a haze of therapy sessions, medical checkups, and cautious reconnections with a few people I could trust. Dr. Simmons became my anchor. He introduced me to endotherapy, guided breathing techniques, and journaling exercises that helped me process the layers of trauma Katherine had caused. I even started a nightly ritual, sitting by the family photo on the mantel, writing down memories that felt genuine to me, reclaiming my life from the narrative Katherine had tried to rewrite. I began small. I started keeping a monthly budget, allocating my $3,200 salary in a way that allowed me to feel safe and independent again. I replaced my gas station midnight snacks with healthier alternatives, cooking meals with Gregory when he visited. The act of preparing food, of taking ownership of what I put into my body, became a symbol of reclaiming control after months of poisoning and manipulation. I also began setting boundaries. Emails, texts, and social media messages from anyone remotely connected to Katherine were blocked. I told Daniel gently but firmly, "I know you were manipulated, I forgive you, but I can't allow that influence to continue." His eyes welled up. There was guilt, yes, but also relief, finally, some honesty between us. Therapy became more than just a treatment, it was a roadmap. I learned to identify triggers, midnight texts, certain smells, even the faintest hint of baby powder, and approach them with grounding techniques. Panic attacks still came, but I had strategies to ride them out instead of being consumed. Dissociative episodes became less frequent as I rebuilt routines, slept regularly, and reconnected with friends who had stood by me. I also faced the social consequences head-on. I reached out to former church friends individually, explaining the situation calmly, without anger, so that truth could mend relationships wherever possible. Slowly, trust began to return. People who had whispered behind my back now offered apologies, their faces reflecting embarrassment and, in some cases, genuine remorse. The legal aftermath continued to unfold. Katherine was held accountable. Her orchestrated manipulation, poisoning, and breaches of confidentiality had legal consequences. The police confirmed she had been under surveillance for months, and the court orders ensured she could no longer contact me or my family. The plot twist that the authorities had been monitoring her all along gave me a sense of justice I had longed for, but even that was secondary to the internal victory I was achieving. Rebuilding my life also meant reclaiming personal identity. I returned to hobbies I had abandoned: painting, reading, and even volunteering at a local animal shelter. I documented my journey, writing down every emotion, every betrayal, and every moment of resilience. Each word was a step toward healing. I forgave myself for not seeing the manipulation sooner. I realized that none of it was my fault. The nightmares, dissociation, panic attacks, and trust issues were responses to trauma inflicted by someone else. I had survived extreme psychological abuse, betrayal, and physical harm. Surviving that was proof of strength. One night, Months after the trial, I sat alone with Gregory in the living room. The mantle was bare, Catherine's influence removed. Family photo remained, but now it was ours again. Gregory nudged me gently. You've come a long way, Mark. You're not the same person she tried to make you. I smiled, a genuine smile that felt earned. I know, I said softly. And I'm not afraid anymore. I had forgiven myself, rebuilt trust slowly but deliberately, and started to feel the world not as a threat, but as a place where I could exist safely, authentically, and powerfully. Every therapy session, every supportive friend, every honest conversation with Daniel was another brick in the foundation of a life reclaimed. The scars remain, but they are no longer chains, they are reminders of resilience. I can walk into a church without fear, hold my niece without anxiety, and even taste gas station snacks again without flinching. I am still Mark, but stronger, wiser, and more unbreakable than I ever imagined. And now, when I look at the family photo on the mantle, I don't see a symbol of manipulation, I see survival, recovery, and the hard-earned victory of reclaiming my life from someone who tried to destroy it. The story doesn't end with Catherine's defeat. It ends with my empowerment, my choice to live fully, to forgive, and to embrace the life I fought so hard to